Hi, everybody. My name is Aram Melkoumov. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Crowdlinker. I'll tell you quickly about myself and then our company and what we're doing with this Fireside Chat series. And then I'll get into the topic and to the guest that we have here today, Boris, and cover some housekeeping items. While I'm going through the intros, I'm going to throw up a quick poll just so that we can get some information about where everybody's coming from and how you found out about it. And then once I'm done the intros, I'll turn off the poll so that we can focus the conversation on Boris and I talking. So quickly about me, I've been in the tech space for about 13 years now. I've launched a few different startups myself. Crowdlinker is kind of my main success that I have over the last few years. It's my only real successful one to date. So I'm pretty proud of that. Yeah, we originally started Crowdlinker 8 years ago. We were a tech startup building our own products, and then we evolved over time into being an award-winning digital product design and engineering studio. So, I'm going to do a quick shameless plug here. I hope you all don't mind. What is Crowdlinker? So we work with companies of all sizes, primarily small, medium enterprises, as well as some scale-ups, where we help them everything from ideation, validation of new product ideas that they want to do, and then go through design thinking exercises and design sprints. And then once those are done and we have some proof of concepts and MVPs, then we go into building like a full production ready product with our great software engineering team. And then once the product's built, then we have a team dedicated to actually launching the product to the market. And so we have a lot of experience kind of going end to end, which makes us quite unique in the market. And so we work with a bunch of companies across different industries and different verticals. So we're very agnostic in terms of the companies and the products that we build, which makes us quite unique as well in the market. So I'll kind of jump into like what we're doing with the series and how we stumbled upon it. So over the last, year or so, we've been working a lot with enterprises. And what we saw was that there was a void in the market or in that knowledge that wasn't as available or abundant towards startups and scale-ups that where they could share learnings in terms of like what to do things the right way in terms of internal product development or innovation. What are some of like the bad things to do? And so we saw that there was like this gap, and enterprises or innovation leaders at enterprises don't have the ability to share this with other people as publicly or as open as at startups and scale-ups. So we're like, okay, let's create a great kind of educational format type of approach where we're going to get great guest speakers to come on, like Boris here, who's going to be able to share some of that learnings and hopefully pass that on internally into your organizations and to help you thrive in your career and grow your mindset around innovation. And so that's kind of how we got here today. We had one already before with Julie Kerr. I don't know if you've seen it, but you could go to our YouTube page and check it out there. We have one weekly. So we have a very frequent cadence around this Fireside Chat series, which is going to have a great lineup of speakers coming in and sharing this type of insight with everybody. So now I'm going to quickly jump into the intro topic. So today we're going to be talking about what it's like to be innovating from within one of the most complex financial institutions. We have Boris here today from Deutsche Bank. He's based in New York. I'm actually based in Barcelona right now. So we're worlds apart, but technology brings us together. So Boris is going to share his experience as an innovation leader working at Deutsche Bank. We'll be chatting more about how he innovates and the process around it in the organization, as well as how he partners with key partners to help him drive that internally. And with COVID and everything that happened, how do you keep driving change in a constantly fluctuating market, especially in the financial industry? So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Boris. Boris is the Global Finance and Treasury Innovation Lead at Deutsche Bank. So thanks for being here with us. So, please, Boris, can you introduce yourself for everybody?
Hello, everybody. I'm I'm part of the Deutsche Bank Innovation Labs team. We're part of the bigger umbrella under strategy and innovation. We're roughly a team of 30, most likely over 30 people, spread globally in Singapore, Germany, London, and in Americas. We have one location in Palo Alto and one in New York. So I think we're plugged in very well into the fintech ecosystem. So yeah, it's and I've been in this specific role for 2 years.
14 years, right?
No, two
oh,
years.
2 years. Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Before we jump into kind of some of the questions, I just want to close up the polls. But before I do that, just quick housekeeping things before I forget, just so everybody knows. So we're recording this. We'll be sharing it after next week once we kind of clean it up and we publish it on our channel. So check it out there. And everybody who's attending today will also get it by email. So look out for that. Boris and I are going to be discussing different things, but there's going to be an official time for Q&A starting at around 2:40 p.m. So you can start sending some of your questions into the chat, and we'll get to them once we're closer towards the Q&A period. And please stick around towards the end because there's going to be a survey that goes out to everybody once the webinar is done, because we want to learn how we could do better and improve the whole process. So please stay for that. Cool. So I'm going to close the poll just so that's not distracting us. Awesome. So Boris, I wanted to jump into kind of like your bit of a background in startup world. I know before Deutsche Bank, you spent some time working at a trucking industry and built a product around it. Can you quickly talk about what that was like? Because I know you raised some funding as well. And I think that could be a great segue towards how you evolved into being an enterprise and doing innovation there.
Got it. So I'll give you some. My background is pretty diverse. So for 12 years, I've been in the financial industry. So for my professional career, I've been with large companies, global enterprises, and primarily spent most of my time just resolving issues that would typically be what you would consider your back office. I don't know how many people are here from large enterprises, but primarily dealt with problems within back office to middle office. Mm-hmm. And kind of finance obviously is a very broad term, but to be specific, I was in the regulatory space under finance. So one of the things I was kind of specializing in is something that's called stress testing. This was after the recent financial crisis. This is what I've been kind of specializing in. So spent 12 years polishing my experience. And today this is more of a I believe it's becoming more BAU type work versus kind of special project-based activities. So I think things have come down a bit. And roughly around 2013, this was a very bizarre introduction and segue into how I got into the whole innovation space. And I've been a technology geek all my life. So technology has always been a tool to do things better and faster. Mm. And an acquaintance of mine basically spoke to me about a problem because I was very familiar with technology and how to solve problems using technology, at least in finance. And he had a BA type role just like I did. And the problem that he came to me with was about regulation in the trucking industry. I mean, it is bizarre now that I think about it. So he had a friend. Like, there's always a good story behind these topics. So he had a friend. The friend was he owned a small bus company, and I think after this conversation, you guys will have a completely different appreciation for a lot of these things. So he told us about a problem where he constantly has to deal with paperwork. We were like, what do you mean you drive a bus? What are you talking about? So apparently, like big buses that transport people, like 50 people or so, and big what's considered the class 8 trucks, like the big rigs that you see on the road everywhere. That industry is pretty regulated, and anytime a driver goes on a shift, he has to deal with paperwork. So paperwork is like he has to do inspection of a vehicle, or he has to write down how many hours he drives. And it's been a paper-based process up until the point where Obama basically put a regulation in for it to be kind of mandatory for this process to become electronic towards the end of 2017.
Mm-hmm.
So this is 2013. We're like, and we started looking in the industry. There were, few what we would call dinosaur players out there because this concept is not new. But there were very few new entrants in the market. So, the iPhone 5S, I think, was around the time when this has been happening. So we kind of got a feel of what iPhone experience was like. Long story short, we spent 6 months doing marketing analysis, seeing, should we bother, solving a problem just for him, or is there a bigger opportunity? Remember, we know nothing about trucking. We're just two BAs who like to solve problems.
Right. And so, what were like some of your biggest learnings and takeaways that you kind of carried from that startup experience into your current role?
So let me spend maybe another minute talking about it. So when we finished kind of doing the marketing, we realized that we were dealing with a $1 trillion industry.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing that I want to just mention, without trucks, America stops. So like 70% of freight that's being moved today in US is done by trucks. So the opportunity was huge. And, I was involved with it for about 2 years, up to a point where we got to an MVP. I actually have a physical, it's a 3D printed casing and some, I don't know if you guys can see it, but some 3D printed printed boards, etc. So, we got, both of us were not technologists. Mm-hmm. So we found a company who we work with. We raised some friends and family funds, and we went at it for 2 years. And we were at the point where we were contingent on getting funding if we and the company that was kind of doing the technology aspect of it would merge. The merge did not happen. So my colleague, my co-founder, partner, proceeded to deal with lawyers and to get IP. Long story short, I said it was, for me, it wasn't worth it. So I left, kind of kept sweat and equity. Mm-hmm. And that was it. So the 3 things that I learned, because there should be always a trifecta, I think, of things. So you can learn just about anything if you put your mind and time to it. So I was working 9 to 5, and 5 until whenever we would pass out. We would work on the startup, and weekends we were at it 24/7. Mm-hmm. It was like true hustle. We learned technology like there's no. It was an unbelievable experience. We learned how to do pitches. We were in offices of New York City Transit Authority. We were dealing with companies that transported nuclear waste and missiles for the Department of Defense. It was an incredible experience. But we would learn all of it, and we got it through the doors ourselves. And it still leads me to my next point. that most people are, typically good and are willing to help you. So, there are tough times in the world, but I would say most people are good, and unfortunately, there will be few that will trip you up. But don't let it kind of get people down. So always be optimistic and always trust your gut. I know it's a very might be very cliche thing to say, but gut goes a long way.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's one thing you can trust. Um, awesome. Well, that's great. Thanks so much for that background in terms of your prior experience, and for sharing the learnings. I appreciate it, Boris. I wanted to kind of move into kind of your role now at Deutsche Bank, and you have these learnings and you applied it into your new role. I want to know and maybe share with like the rest of people who are going to be listening is like, how does an idea that you flow from like a concept stage internally at Deutsche Bank, how does it flow through the different processes of approvals and stakeholder involvements and business use cases and approvals and things like that? Can you share
Right.
some of that in terms of what that looks like in your organization?
Yes. So I think there are a lot of methodologies depending on the company, but kind of what we have is, I think everybody have to follow a structure. So it has to be a robust process.
Okay.
It cannot be bespoke. So I think that's the first thing. The second is we follow kind of four categories of I would say kind of maturation,
Mm-hmm.
where you go from beginning and hopefully to the end. So what we call it discovery, evaluation, execution, and adoption.
Okay. And so how do you get your ideas around discovery? Like how do you source ideas?
So you have typically, personal in my experience, I've read primarily there are two ways. One is there's typically a demand that comes from your stakeholder. So let's say there is a technology limitation, or there is there's something missing in the process, where either you have cost constraints to deal with, an audit finding, whatever it may be. So that's kind of one way.
Mhm.
And the second is you provide your kind of 2 cents because you're familiar with what you're doing. And I have an idea of what the end users need and lack.
Okay.
So this helps me quite a bit to offer ideas. That's really kind of two venues.
Okay, got it. And once you kind of have an idea and you provide your input from like an end user perspective, how do you go about getting other stakeholders to support the idea or even creating budgets around it? And like, what do you do? Do you create like a proof of concept? Do you do a design sprint?
Right.
How do you
So
incorporate like design thinking into the exercise that you do?
it's a combination of things. So once you have this kind of structure, and you propose the idea that that either you formalize the idea with your stakeholder,
Mhm.
where where you have either formal catch-ups with them, let's say the quarterly, monthly, whatever works, where you kind of bring these ideas up, or on bespoke basis as needed. So that's one way. So the idea comes, and your stakeholder, where you have to look like you have to be a trusted advisor to your stakeholder.
Okay.
They don't have the expertise or the time to know everything, at least within the fintech ecosystem. But this is my credit. This is kind of what I pride myself on.
Okay.
So by being a trusted advisor, you tell them, look, I think this should be explored, and you kind of get the unofficial green light.
Okay.
So
Know what happens next?
what happens next is let's say you feel that the current platform or solution that one of the stakeholders are using is either expensive or inefficient, and there are better ones out there.
Mhm.
So you do a market scan, like you see what is out there, what good looks like, and you begin to formalize either a quantitative or some sort of a qualitative analysis to select your top choices.
Okay.
You slowly begin to add the cost component to all of it. You formalize your total cost of ownership, and you are selecting your, let's say, top candidates, and get ready. You're ready for your POC, and this is when the real work starts. So doing POC is obviously will differ company by company. In some companies, in smaller companies, it might be easier. In a large regulated institution, it would be a lot more difficult, or perhaps more time consuming. But you're still trying to be as agile as possible. You're talking weeks, few weeks, not months.
Okay.
But of course, it varies.
Okay. And it's like, so just like out of curiosity, like how many ideas do you generate and how many actually make it to like POC stage? Like rough ratio.
So there's another thing that you have to always keep in mind is, so I'm innovation. I'm kind of the guy who comes from the outside, and I want to stir things up, maybe go outside of the status quo.
Okay.
But big organizations typically work in a very strategic and organized fashion with times for budgets, implementation life cycles, etc., etc. So the key, I would say, the most important, one of the important items is you have to make sure your technology partners are on board.
Okay. With the process, with like how.
With the process, correct? Yes. So whatever idea you highlight, you want to make sure that it is, no matter how radical it is, that you always think from strategy point of view, because you might be solving a technical problem that has a life of only 9 months. But strategic projects are obviously multi-year in duration. So.
And so like sometimes you might, like you said, like sometimes you need to find some strategic partners or external vendors to work on it. How do you go about, what's like your process there around finding them and evaluating them and bringing them into the fold around the process?
So, assuming there is, so if we're just talking, assuming there's nothing internally exists that can address the problem, because just because finance has a problem, there might be solution that exists in the front office. You don't know that. So you want to be plugged in with your peers. You want to be plugged in into your engineering ecosystem throughout the bank. So the bank has, let's say, 80,000 people spread globally.
Right.
So you really have to be plugged in and know what's going on everywhere. You don't have to be an expert, but you have to know who to call, at least. So assuming there's nothing outside and you do have to explore options outside, there's typically a theme. So, if theme is around, NLP, you kind of, at least what to search for. If the theme is around, let's say, some machine learning modeling, that's kind of one venue. If it's self-service tools, that's something else. So there's typically themes, and we work with VCs, we work with accelerators, and obviously you always pay attention to what's happening on TechCrunch, etc. So we always have to, back in the day, pre-COVID, we always attended conferences and yeah.
And so, like, you mentioned kind of pre-COVID. Now it's like we're in the whole situation. So, like, I know that financial markets have been trying to fluctuate with the different kind of things happening in the industry to keep up with consumer demand. how would you say internally or like from an innovation standpoint, you're keeping up with that? Like making sure that, with the changes in the market, with how people are consuming things or experiencing the brand of Deutsche Bank, like from an innovation perspective, what do you?
Right, right. So the first thing that probably happened with COVID is there's no more, face-to-face interactions. Everything moved to virtual.
Like this.
Right, exactly. We'll hopefully be talking in person on the comfy couch, but it's moving virtual just means that whatever you were and however you were interacting before,
Okay.
you still continue to do that. So the work doesn't start. Like the markets, they didn't close. They continue to operate. So as long as, but the interesting bit is obviously many people, well, most people work from home. So the infrastructure thankfully kept up the pace, and there was I don't think there was any downtime for us. Just inconvenience for where you used to work with two screens. Now you have a laptop or one screen to work with, right? But that's really it. But from consumer perspective, it's just we adopted like everybody else. Innovation. The cliche phrase that one of my mentors is using: "Innovation doesn't sleep."
Okay.
So we still have we continue to do what we had to do. So projects did not stop.
Okay. And how do you see you're in the innovation leadership role at Deutsche Bank, and you're still in the mix. COVID isn't going away right now. Maybe when we have a vaccine, for example. How do you see your role potentially changing post-COVID? Do you think you're going to be spending more time on other things or spending less time on certain things? Where do you see your focus going?
I wish we had better developed AR technology. If you
AR
ask me.
technology? Okay.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Talking, face to not but talking virtually like this obviously fills the void. But I think you still want to get that more immersive experience.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that would be pretty cool if AR was a bit more mainstream.
Okay.
Travel, of course, is going to be inhibited for a while. So. From innovation perspective, meeting stakeholders, I would say you always it's always been better to meet them in person.
Mm-hmm.
But I will definitely, or I miss that for sure. But as far as the core technology, you can do a lot of it virtually. So that has been great.
Okay. Is there more things that you are focusing on from doubling down on with everything going on, or do you think that post-COVID things are going to go back to normal, or do you see this as a permanent change in the industry?
I think there's going to be newer innovation topics, and the topics that perhaps would have taken longer to mature are coming to fruition a lot faster. So like Zoom, for example, has seen tremendous growth, and whatever gaps they had, they probably would not have addressed them, maybe let's say for 9, maybe 12 months. But because, in a matter of weeks, a good portion of the planet started using Zoom, they had to address them right away. Right. So there was, that's kind of the first thing that pops in my mind. But yeah, does this answer the question, or?
Yeah, no, it's I know you probably can't share too much about some of the projects you're working on, but is there any innovative projects that you are working on that you could share about
So just holistically, just to share what's already public. So we, our strategic partnership with Google,
Okay.
I think is very important, and participating in a few projects on that front for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So I think cloud is a big strategy for sure.
Okay. What do you feel are some, like, as an innovation leader, you probably are come across where people talk about some common misconceptions or beliefs around what innovation is like. What do you feel you could tell to other innovation leaders that are don't spend too much time on this, focus on that, some lessons learned?
I think you have to be a very good listener.
Okay.
It's I think it's one of the things. It's I would call it put it under the umbrella of empathy under design thinking, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's very important to be a good listener.
For who? Like the end user?
From both from your stakeholders and end users. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. And like, how do you use design thinking at Deutsche Bank?
I think it's at this point it's like, you don't look at it from like phases point of view. It's almost, at least within the innovation circle, it's about iteration.
Okay.
So you want to, whatever you're going back to your proof of concept, you want to fail as quickly as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Because you don't want to spend the time evaluating and then you realize, oh, there's a gap or it's too expensive or whatever it may be.
Okay.
So I would say iteration.
And so, like, with iterations, like, at the end of the day, there's always some sort of standard that's being measured upon. So, like, how do you, like, from a return on investment standpoint, how do you measure that in an innovation role?
So it depends. So let's say if I'm working on a specific project, there's always an ROI. Typically, there's some sort of an ROI, right? It has to make sense. Mm-hmm. Either, let's say, the new solution is has a lower cost of lower cost of ownership, or innovation could be educating people. So if I, let's say, educate 300 people over the course of a year and give them basic training on Python, and then they apply those learnings on their day-to-day job. Mm-hmm. It's harder to measure, but at least there's a number, the 300 strong.
Okay, that's interesting. So I mean, innovation can be really anything. Yeah, like.
Yes. There are other verticals, but which we're trying to define internally as like within the strategy. Mm-hmm. But I would say it can definitely take a lot of forms. There's just, I know it's a very broad topic, but it can definitely take a lot of forms.
And like, is there a specific kind of checklist or criteria set that you kind of go through before you ship something or before you release a new product?
Well, internally, let's say if we are adopting a product, there's a whole life cycle to bring a vendor in. Mm-hmm. So like just like vendor risk management, you have to go through, obviously, contract. You have to agree on pricing with the vendor, so you get procurement involved. Right. Some companies have to go through, security audit, review, etc. So the process is there's a checklist. Mm-hmm. Sure.
So where do you go to learn, like, to be a better innovation leader, or somebody you could go to you are like the place where people go to for advice, right? You're that trusted person in the organization, right, for certain things. So like, do you have specific mentors, or like, do you follow any specific types of learning, criteria to kind of improve? Anything you could share about that?
Yeah, no, definitely. So, luckily we live in a world where It is very easy. You have access to a lot of information. Um, I like to follow TechCrunch.
Okay.
All the latest and greatest typically shows up there. So companies that come out of stealth. We work with a lot of VCs, so we do. Everybody does it to a degree. We do sessions with them where they talk to us about trends that they see or companies they work with, that they invest in.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Can I just go deeper on that? So it's interesting that you have this relationship with venture capitalists because, like, yeah, venture capitalists get pitched thousands of times, perhaps per year, in their firms, and they see a lot of things that are coming about in the market. Do they kind of give any market research, or I mean, how do they share the information for you to action?
Right. So VCs, and I just this is more of my opinion than perhaps a hardcore rule, but some VCs specialize in certain fields.
Mm-hmm.
So they're experts, let's say, I don't know, in analytics. So they will probably, they will probably see thousands of companies that are in that space.
Mm-hmm.
And whoever they choose to invest in, if a VC puts money into a company, this is a pretty good sniff test.
Okay.
Right. So chances are that company kind of they passed the first level.
The litmus test.
Yeah, the litmus test.
Mm-hmm.
And afterwards, if let's say we have a demand where let's say a team needs to improve their analytics capability or whatever, and we know that VC specializes in that, we'll go to them and they'll say, this is how the market looks. Here's how we think it's going to look, let's say, in 5 years or 3 years. We believe these are, as of today, these are like the top companies, and you kind of make an introduction and we talk to them.
Okay. And is it more about, bringing in their technology into Deutsche Bank, or is it for like investment purposes as well into businesses?
It's for the most part, it's to bring the capability, to bring in the yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, what are some other tips? Like, I think having a good connection with venture capitalists in your space is great. What are some of the tips you would give to other innovation leaders at other companies about how they could stir up the pot a bit, or like bring some more change into their organization?
I mean, you definitely need support from senior leadership on this topic. You can't just, walk into somebody's office and propose ideas out of the blue. There has to be consensus within the firm that you have to innovate. Today you have to innovate, period. Like, if you don't innovate, it's not going to look good. Yeah. So I would say, for the most part, and talking with friends, colleagues, and with peers, people are definitely all about. Everybody has the right mindset on the innovation topic as a whole. Mm-hmm. So once you have senior leadership support, typically it helps when it goes top to bottom.
Okay. I'm interested, before we get into the Q&A, I had some quick kind of questions back and forth that I want to go through.
Sure.
So like the first one is, what is something innovation leaders at organization should stop doing like right away?
This is my personal opinion. This should not be taken out of context by any means. Just select quality over quantity. So just because you have a dozen ideas doesn't mean they're good, but you can have two ideas that are great.
Okay.
So
on that same point, what are some things that they should start doing like immediately? Like starting tomorrow?
If they don't already do it, iterate, fail as quickly as possible to find to find the right solution so that you can move on and adopt it as quickly as possible.
Okay. And you kind of mentioned like, TechCrunch and other things. Any other kind of tips or tricks for sharpening an innovation mindset?
It's personal education. So, whether people spend time on Coursera studying or
Okay.
following brilliant minds, brilliant folks from MIT, and paying attention to either their webcasts or YouTube, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
But it's whatever kind of piques your interest, and you can definitely find endless amount of information on this topic for sure,
Were
or
there,
whatever topic.
just out of curiosity, just from my own knowledge, were there any events in your life that kind of credits you to go towards going like into innovation?
Yes, 100%.
Any particular one?
Yeah, so my mom bought me a computer. She said I have to get the best one. At the time, she spent $4,000.
$4,000.
Yeah, on a computer. And I think that was the pivotal point where I had appreciation for technology.
Okay, interesting.
It was the best investment she's ever made.
Yeah, well, like it's paid off, right?
Yeah, I hope so.
Cool. Well, I'm gonna jump into the Q&A side, and some questions I have here. So I'm gonna fire some away. Okay. So the first one is, how can startups, fintechs, specifically since you might work with them more, do a proof of concept with Deutsche Bank? Like, what does a procurement process look like?
Well, first, so typically I would say, drop us an email. That's probably the easiest way. If you do, we were in the process of updating our external page on innovation. I still think there's an older page. If there is no link, I'm just happy to give my email address and drop me a note, and I can navigate accordingly.
Awesome. Okay, cool. Next one here is, a lot of employees at larger organizations struggle to get their ideas in front of decision makers. How can organizations encourage more bottom up innovation?
That's a great question, and it's a very delicate one. So it comes with risks. So typically, and I work with a lot of people. Today I work with a lot of people within kind of on the front line, so to say, where they also live and breathe innovation, but they say they understand the problem, they know what the ideal outcome should look like, but they don't have anybody to talk to. So, for example, I'm one of those people who they can talk to, and I can take action against it. In other cases, folks might, they can go to and speak with their senior leaders or whoever their manager is. It might be hit or miss. But let's say in our organization, like within my remit, if the management that will listen regardless, but they can always come to me.
Okay, cool. Awesome. A few more. How does your team ensure the customer is at the center of each decision you make as an innovation leader?
Can you repeat that question again? Because I need to frame it, because again, I don't deal with end user and customers. For me, a customer for the most part is somebody internal.
Okay.
So let's rephrase that. Repeat the question. We'll try to rephrase it.
Yeah. So maybe it's about how do you look at each customer, whether that's internal or external, their needs, and how do you come to a decision about whether or not something needs to be maybe followed on?
Action on, right? So this really just goes back to the whole being patient and listening. So sometimes somebody can come and venting, oh my God, this platform or thing doesn't work, and A, you listen, B, and the typical action is, I understand it doesn't work, but this is a great tool, perhaps you need additional training, or we are in a process of replacing it.
Got it. Okay. Okay. Cool.
If it helps.
Okay. Got a few more that came in. How would you advise a bank to approach innovation in a very competitive market where products might be getting copied from one bank to the other, and where the fintechs are also a threat?
All right. So I was actually thinking a question like this might come up.
Okay.
It's a great question. So fintechs definitely could be perceived as a threat.
Mm-hmm.
However, even though fintechs are able to innovate fast and they're a lot more nimble,
Yeah.
they might what they gain on that front, they lack in experience and scale.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Obviously, there's always caveats to all of it, but I think that's kind of the general consensus. And believe it or not, we see endless examples of it, and what's been happening within the fintech industry is it's all about partnership, really. Mm-hmm. It's a lot easier to partner and work together than try to acquire a customer directly. Again, it's all relative, just my 2 cents, but partnerships actually work out quite nicely.
Okay. And what about like from like other competing banks, like where products might be copied or replicated? See that as a threat?
I'm sure there's always going to be there's just so much to innovate that you really don't worry about copying something hand in hand. That you're really just trying to concentrate on your value proposition, because you know what good looks like for your ultimate consumer. Mm-hmm. I'm almost want to deflect it and not say anything else, but okay. I would not worry.
Awesome, thank you. A couple more before we wrap up. This is more like on a forward-thinking kind of thing. Like, what are some trends you see happening in the banking industry, like say in the next few years?
So definitely, cloud is going to play a huge part in the foreseeable future. Mm-hmm. Some banks are maybe slightly ahead, some are behind. Mm-hmm. But cloud is going to play. It's going to be, I think, it's going to be a game changer. But between political, regulatory, and endless and security reasons, it's a very slow journey. But banks have been there around for years. I would say all of them more, not in the 90th percentile, are struggling with old technology and educating people. Mm-hmm. It's a journey, but we'll get there.
Okay.
Everybody will.
Last 2 questions, and then we'll wrap up. Who is on your innovation team? What does that team composition look like? And what do you need to hire for?
So typically the composition, I would say bulk of the people are business minded. We have a number of folks who are very tech savvy. We're definitely expanding team to include developers as well, like full stack developers. Yeah. Because sometimes you really, to answer if there's truly a problem that you're trying to solve for, sometimes you really need an outside technologist, outsider perspective.
Right.
So that's gonna be a very good mix when you have kind of an architect, a business person, and a developer, hands-on developer, to answer a demand from a
Like
stakeholder.
like a Scrum team or a small
SWAT, yeah,
designers, engineers. Okay, very
yeah.
cool. Actually, it's a good segue into my last question around the development side of things. Does Deutsche Bank have an open test sandbox with anonymized that anonymized data?
I think we're working on that. So at least for internal purposes. For external purposes, there is also an API, a banking API that outside developers can tap into.
Okay.
And I can find somebody who's responsible for that.
Okay, cool. That'd be great.
If there's interest, yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah. That's wicked. Thank you so much, Boris. I think we have a little bit more time. Was there anything else that you want to kind of like say to dump some wisdom to the viewers?
I mean, you know, innovation doesn't sleep. Like we do work a lot. There's a lot of interesting topics. Technology changes at an incredible pace, and I guess the key piece of wisdom I would say is education, like personal development, is key today, because the skills that were important 20 years ago versus 10 years ago, they changed dramatically.
Right.
But what's even more exciting is how will all of this look in 5 to 10 years.
I think the skill sets are going to change quite a bit in the next 5 to 10 years in terms of.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. Cool. That's awesome. Thank you so much for your time, Boris, and sharing all this great knowledge with us. I really appreciate it. So
awesome. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So just to kind of wrap up, just want to let everybody know that this is recorded. You will get a copy of it as soon as it's ready. So stay tuned for that and keep an eye out for your inbox. Just to mention, the next event that we have next Thursday is just 1 week away from today. It's around the same time. We'll be chatting with James Coe. He's at NBC Universal and he's a senior product lead there. So I'm really excited for that conversation, as they're in a different market focused on digital distribution and content. So stay tuned and follow our LinkedIn company page for more information on when that's going to be available so you can register. So